You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to CanesCounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30 for the first 30 days. And also, of course, subscribe to this YouTube channel as well as this podcast as well. It's on all platforms. And today I am joined by Mark Passwaters. He covers the Texas A&M Aggies, and he is the publisher for Aggie Yell. Thank you for joining me today, Mark.
Sure, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And he's been covering the Aggies for over a decade, and so he knows everything there is to know about A&M. And of course, Miami will play Texas A&M this Saturday at Hard Rock Stadium. And first off, before we get started with the game, I watched the Johnny Manziel documentary, and I thought it was outstanding. I mean, the fact that he was just basically running amok, not just through College Station, but through the entire world. Basically, really gave me an insight as to kind of what was going on with him and just that era. But you lived it, Mark. So kind of tell me about that era and just your experience.
Well, in terms of covering football, it was the most exciting 2 years you can imagine, because I've never seen a player like Johnny Manziel. I probably will never see another player like Johnny Manziel. He was absolutely amazing. You talk about God-given talent. It's like the Lord just sat there, and when he went through the line, just gave him all kinds of instinct, quickness, speed, accuracy. And this is going to sound strange, but intelligence. In spite of the fact that you sit there and you look at, the dumb things that he did, not watching film, showing up late to practice, this, that, and the other thing, he'd still go out there and just absolutely terrorize teams. Right. And it was because he could naturally figure stuff out on the fly. And dumb people can't do that. And he did things I've never seen before and will never see again. And, it was a lot of fun. And, I still remember being in line at a Subway in my hometown of Pearland and getting a ding on my phone saying, Johnny Manziel has followed you on Facebook, or sent you a friend request on Facebook. I'm like, why is the Oregon commit sending me, a friend request? So I add him, and he's like, hey, I'm about to decommit from Oregon. I'm going to flip to A&M. I just want to let you know. And that started a relationship that has gone on for a long time. We still talk every now and again, not as much as we did when he was in Aggie land, but, just a remarkable story. I hope it has a happy ending. He still has an awful lot of money to spend, and it seems like he's starting to get stuff straightened out. So I'm hopeful for him. I just wish that, you go back to 2012, A&M kicks a couple of field goals against Florida and LSU. They're in the national championship game.
Yeah.
It was that close. And then 2013, he had another spectacular season. Absolutely showed guts. Against Auburn, he was hurt badly. I mean, he separated his shoulder, and I remember him going under the stands before Kyle Field was renovated. And I was back there too, and I could hear him just yelling, give me a shot, give me a shot. And he went back in that game with a separated shoulder. He should have missed the rest of the year. He played the next Saturday and didn't miss a game. So there's a lot to Johnny that people don't realize. He wasn't just this maniac party animal. He would put his body on the line for his teammates too. And I think that kind of gets overlooked. But, it's kind of funny because the legend of Johnny Manziel has two parts. One, where he absolutely crushed college football, and then there's a great divider because then all of a sudden he's the the party boy NFL flop,
Yeah.
and it's an interesting story. But the part that I really like is obviously the college thing because he was absolutely a generational talent, and I don't know if we'll ever see one like him.
Yeah, he was amazing to watch, from a person who just is a lover of college football. He was just an amazing talent to watch. And just to watch the documentary was just a real eye opener for me, just in different areas of general life as far as mental health and just dealing with adversity and money laundering and all kinds of things. I mean, I highly recommend it. I know, Mark, you said you haven't seen it yet and you probably don't have to, but I do recommend watching it
Yeah.
to anyone who kind of wants to see a great story. And it doesn't seem like it's done yet. It's there's still more to be told of his story,
Yeah.
and so it could be a part two.
Yeah, and I think one of the funny things is that here you and I are sitting here talking, and A&M and Miami are two of the big NIL schools in existence. And you look at, I remember Johnny getting in all this, all this hullabaloo about getting $30,000 for an autograph signing. That would be a Tuesday. Now,
Right,
a day later, no one would care.
right,
And
exactly.
it's just highly ironic how holier than thou the NCAA was back then, and now you go and you get crushed in a court case in front of the Supreme Court, and they're just like, whatever, we don't care.
Right,
And that's kind of where we are now. So it's part of the things that villainized him when he was at A&M are now just absolutely commonplace. I'm sure that $30,000 in these two locker rooms is child's play.
yeah, it definitely changed the landscape of NIL or the perception of it. I can't imagine him in this era and just how much money he would make. It would be a great number to be had for Johnny Manziel. But on to this week's game. The Aggies, like I said, will travel to Miami to play the Hurricanes. These two teams were so similar and are so similar going into this season. Last season, both teams went 5-7, and both offenses were pretty much anemic. Both teams struggled to stop the run. What do you think went wrong last season for A&M?
Absolutely everything. Yeah, seriously, it was a disaster of a season. You take a look at anything that could go wrong, it did. They they lost a total of 40 players at one point to injuries, illness, or suspensions. They brought in this great 2022 class, and some of the guys that they recruited, and this is their fault as well as anybody's, just were bad fits in the locker room. Those guys are gone, but some of them didn't even make it to they got kicked off the team, their second teams before the season even began. Chris Marshall was a receiver that played against Miami. He's gone from Ole Miss. I mean, you got to work hard to get kicked off at Ole Miss. And Smoke Bowie was a corner. I think he played a little bit against Miami, and he went to Georgia, and he's gone. Ish Harris was a linebacker. He went to Houston, and he's gone. Denver Harris is on thin ice at LSU. Uh, Yule Keith Brown, who wasn't a 2022 guy, but is a Miami guy. He
Yeah,
got suspended twice, and he's gone. He went to Tulane. There was a house cleaning in the locker room,
yeah,
for sure. And there are other things that have changed. First, the most obvious is the offense has changed. Uh, Jimbo came to the realization that what he was doing wasn't working. He hired Bobby Petrino, and I think to the surprise of just about everybody, he's gone hands off and he's a CEO coach now.
yeah.
He was walking down the sidelines with a single piece of paper on Saturday, And you compare that to last year when it looked like he had the Cheesecake Factory menu, just page after page after page of stuff.
Right.
And I think that's helped, they're faster, they're more cohesive offensively. I think that they've also had that 2022 class mature. These are now these are not wet behind the ears freshmen anymore. These are now experienced sophomores because they got thrown in the fire.
Sure.
So you have that. You have an established quarterback. I think they're more comfortable with DJ Durkin, who was a first-year defensive coordinator last year. The offensive line seems more comfortable with Steve Adazio, who was a first-year offensive line coach last year. All the things that came together that were bad last year obviously contributed strongly to 5-7. Some of those things now are actually proving to be beneficial, I think. So it's real interesting to see the disaster that was 2022 now kind of almost bearing fruit in 2023.
Right. You sound like you are speaking as if you're talking about Miami, just almost in every aspect. Miami was bitten by the injury bug as well. Miami has brought in a new offensive coordinator in Shannon Dawson, just like Bobby Petrino. Miami had to clean house with a lot of players in that locker room and really kind of bring in some more Cristobal guys to infuse the new culture that Miami is trying to build there. So very similar. But let's talk about the offensive coordinator. Bobby Petrino obviously is the sexy new hire over there in College Station. Only one game in, but I'm pretty sure you were there in fall camp. What do you see from Bobby Petrino and the difference in this offense?
Well, the first thing is that Jimbo's not involved with it for the most part. In fall camp, he was very removed, almost intentionally so, from the operations, the day-to-day things with the player, with the offense, the quarterbacks especially. That was his thing. He was very hands-on with the quarterbacks, and he's backed off, and Petrino has that. I think that some of the things that struck me were there's a lot less yelling, and people remember Bobby Petrino as a guy who was purple in the face, screaming at refs, screaming at players, everything like that. I didn't hear the man's voice until I talked to him at a press conference. He was not a screamer. He wasn't a yeller. And when Jimbo was there, he would throw out these very long, in-depth play calls, kind of like Joe Gibbs was still running the Redskins. That would be what the play call for this one piece of practice. Petrino would be like, he'd say two or three things, and off Weigman would go, or off Max Johnson would go, and they'd do their thing. It's very different. In terms of schematically, it's very different. A&M came out and had a 5-wide set the other day. We hadn't seen that in years. There's a lot more motion. But the thing that I think will be most interesting, and you saw it Saturday, was this is not a team that looks to achieve balance anymore. Like Jimbo wanted a very, we were going to run, we're going to throw, we're going to have balance. Bobby Petrino could care less about balance. He's exploiting matchups. And against New Mexico, they were a very aggressive defense. They sold out to stop the run. They would sneak their safeties up, the seconds right before the snap. A&M was waiting for it, and they're just like, you're going to play man, we're going deep. And that's what they did. They went bombs away the whole game and just absolutely annihilated the UNM secondary, which you would expect. But there was this one poor guy that had 5 pass interference penalties called on him. And basically that kind of sums up what Petrino wants to do. He knew this guy couldn't handle Evan Stewart, or he couldn't handle Noah Thomas. And when that poor kid went out against him, they're like, okay, we're going at him. And they did it over and over and over. And New Mexico didn't adapt, so A&M didn't have to change.
Yeah, that's what I saw from the game as well. It was very pass heavy, but Cristobal came out this week and said that don't be fooled by that, and just kind of be weary of the running game as well, because that the Aggies have a really solid running game. But let's talk about this passing game. You got Connor Weigman as the quarterback, won the job over Max Johnson. Only one game in, like I said, but what have you seen from him as a signal caller?
It's real interesting because when you and I were talking earlier, it's like what separated Connor Weigman from Max Johnson? The answer is not much, but maybe his feet. Uh, Weigman is a dual threat quarterback in the truest sense. He can run. He throws the ball well, uh, but it's that ability with his feet that I think separated him from Johnson. And you saw it on the second play of the season. The first play they ran the ball, didn't get much. He drops back. The line kind of opens up a gap because UNM is blitzing on the sides. He just took off straight up the middle and got 17 yards, got a first down, and that was what really got things going. But you take a look at what Weigman's body of work has been to this point. The big thing that stands out is 13-0. He's thrown 13 career touchdowns and no interceptions. And last year he was playing in Jimbo's offense, which was antiquated. A lot of people knew what was coming. He succeeded anyway. And now with Petrino, I think that he's really found a comfort zone. It's maybe a little more college friendly offense than what Jimbo was running, and obviously the receivers that he has to throw to are really really good. And Jake Johnson is an excellent tight end. He's Max's little brother, so they have some weapons to work with, and now they have a scheme that knows how to utilize those weapons. And I think that Weigman just is a really good fit, and I think that they could operate it well with Max too. But there's just a few more things that Weigman can do that Johnson really can't.
Awesome. Let's talk about the playmakers on this offense. Of course, Anais Smith returns from a broken ankle injury from last season. So I wanted to ask about him and if he, still has that same explosiveness, and some of the other playmakers that are at Weigman's disposal. Just kind of tell me a little bit about them.
Yeah, starting with Anais, yeah, the explosiveness is there. He had a 44-yard punt return last weekend, and there was a lot of stop and start and juking guys and all that. He looked like a nice Smith, for lack of a better term. He also had a couple of nice catches in that game. Jimbo really called him out afterwards for being selfless. He said that he had an outstanding game and he was doing things without the ball. He was blocking. He ran the right routes that helped free up other receivers. Just said he had a great game. You look at the stats: 3 catches for 40 yards. That's not much, but this wasn't his. Simply put, this wasn't his week. Anais doesn't even start, and that's one thing that people don't realize is, when people from the outside look at A&M's offense, they immediately say, okay, they've got Anais Smith. Well, yeah, they got Anais Smith. They also have Noah Thomas, which people are going to learn about if they don't already know after last weekend. They got Evan Stewart, who had 8 catches for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. They have Moose Muhammad, who had 600 yards last year and a great touchdown that's going to be seen for a long time against LSU. All these guys are out there. All of them get utilized. And, it's just going to depend week to week, matchup to matchup, who gets the ball. And this past weekend, it was Thomas and it was Evan Stewart, because those were the guys on the outside. They were the ones running deep, and New Mexico just didn't have an answer for them. So the weapons that A&M thought they might have last year, they do have this year. And, with Weigman being more comfortable and in this scheme with Petrino, the potential is there for them to be very dangerous.
Should be very interesting to see how Miami defensive coordinator Lance Guidry schemes around the offense and these playmakers. But let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. A&M ranked 122nd nationally in rushing defense last season. They only gave up one touchdown. We did see it on this highlight here. It was a rushing touchdown. Do you think that they solved their issues, or do you think they're kind of on the right track to stop the run this weekend against a Miami team that has shown that they can run the football?
If I'm Miami, I'm definitely sticking to the idea of running the football. But the numbers for A&M and the running game last weekend were very favorable. New Mexico came in and they also had a new coordinator. Knew him from UAB, so we had an idea of what kind of scheme they were going to run. There's a lot of two tight ends, run it straight up the middle, and with the exception of that 27-yard run, they did nothing. They totaled 32 carries for 91 yards, which is 2.8 yards a carry. You take away the 27-yard touchdown, where a lot of people said there was two holes, and it was 31 carries.
I did see one.
Yeah,
I did see
31
one for sure.
Yeah, 31 carries for 60-something yards, and right at two flat. And if you're going to hold somebody to 2 yards a carry, you're going to win. So the improvement was tangible. It was noticeable. And I think it comes down to a few things. One, McKinley Jackson is healthy. When A&M played Miami last year, he got into the game very late, didn't do much. Then he missed a couple more games. He played the final 7 and looked like an All-American. He had 38 tackles at defensive tackle. And that's, in an A&M scheme, that's a ton. He also had 7 tackles for loss. He's a tough guy to deal with. And they got Walter Nolan sitting next to him. This is a guy that was the number 2 player in the class last year. He had 7 tackles and 2 tackles for loss against New Mexico. And this guy's just a freak. He's 300 pounds. He ran down a wide receiver from behind on a screen last weekend. And he can do just about anything. But they're deep. They've got a lot of guys who can get out there and play. They also have size at defensive end, which is a big benefit against the run. So if they can hold up the edges, which they did a terrible job of last year, the tackles can get upfield. So that basically leaves the linebackers. And Edgerrin Cooper, who played in the Miami game last year, had the best game of his career last weekend. Looked really, really good. But a lot of that was dependent on a true freshman by the name of Torian York. This kid is out of Temple, Texas. And I'm sure a lot of people in Miami are thinking, oh, they got a church there. Well, no, they have an Army base, a massive Army base. But that's not the point. York is a little undersized guy, but he had 400 tackles in high school and was a 3-time consecutive defensive MVP for his 6A conference. This kid can tackle. And A&M historically likes undersized middle linebackers because of a guy by the name of Dat Wynn, who people may not remember now, but he's a legend here in Aggie land. And
I remember.
Yeah, Dat tackled everybody. And in yesterday's press conference, Jimbo said that a lot of the success against the run had to do with York because he got the calls in faster than the veterans did last year. And that gave them the extra 2 or 3 seconds for the players to concentrate, really get their assignments down. And, it was a very stark difference from what we saw last year because the linebackers fit the right gaps. They didn't run themselves out of plays. The defensive linemen did what they were supposed to do. The discipline was much better is what I'm trying to say. And I think that will really help them. Obviously, Parrish is a totally different animal from what UNM had. But I think that A&M fixed a lot of what was broken by having experience, just having better talent, and guys having a clue what they're supposed to do.
Again, you sound like you're talking about Miami a lot. These teams are just so identical in so many different ways. And even with the recruiting classes, and we kind of touched on that before the show as well. Last year, A&M had the 14th ranked class, and Miami had the 8th ranked class, and a lot of the freshmen played last year. A ton of freshmen are playing this year as well. But from last year's class and this year's class, Mark, what are some of these young guys that you expect to make an impact here in the 2023 season?
We've already mentioned York, and for a true freshman to start at middle linebacker, you would normally think that uh, you've got problems, that you've got injuries. Now this kid just came in flat took the job, and I was a
Wow.
big fan of his, but I was not expecting this. Not this year. He's just done a fantastic job. But outside of that, the other one that immediately stands out is A&M's right tackle, Chase Basantis. He is a true freshman. He's a New Jersey kid, and he came in the spring and just blew everyone away with how good he was. He came in and he was a backup the first week of spring ball. He moved right into the starting lineup in week 2 and has stayed there. A lot of people thought that was because Ruben Fothery, who has been the starting right tackle for the last 2 years, was banged up. Trey Zune, who was the starting left tackle, was banged up in the spring too. So Fothery moved over to the left side for the spring, but then he got banged up again late in spring. Basantis stayed at left or right tackle. Zune came back. Fothery, who was a two-time, 2 straight years didn't miss a start. It was a freshman All SEC in 2021. Doesn't have a job right now. Yeah,
Wow.
this kid has been that good. He bumped who we thought was the best tackle on the team. So he's going to be a guy to watch. 71 is Basanti.
Okay.
Reuben Owens was the number 1 running back in the
Yeah.
country according to Rivals. He's going to play a lot. The Aggies have a 3 back rotation, and by 3 backs I mean literally Amari Daniels could play first down, Le'Veon Moss could play second down, Reuben Owens could play third down. They were rotating that quickly against New Mexico. Owens is a guy who has tremendous explosiveness, ran for a bajillion yards at El Campo, which is a small Texas town. It struggled a little bit against New Mexico. I think that he was just kind of getting used to the big time.
Okay.
But this is a guy that we'll definitely see out there. Javon Thomas is a freshman corner who really impressed people with his play. He was in the rotation this past weekend. Didn't start, but he did play. Outside of that, maybe DJ Hicks, who was the number 3 player in the country last year. He played a little bit in that rotation at defensive tackle. They're just so deep at defensive tackle. He and Gabe Dindy, who is another super talent. Those guys are third stringers. And there's going to be a time when those guys are not third stringers, but it's evidence of what kind of depth they've accumulated on the defensive front. So those are the guys that kind of really stand out when you think about it. There's an awful lot of talent there in that class, even though it was kind of small. Some of those guys we won't see for a while, but those fellas there that I mentioned, you will see, and they'll play big roles come Saturday.
Yeah, Lindy was an outstanding talent coming out of Florida at Lakeland, and DJ Hicks was a prospect that Miami tried to recruit for, all the way up until the very end. And Reuben Owens, we all know about what he can do, and he is paired with one of those Miami guys in Amari Daniels. Amari Daniels is a player that won state championships down here with Miami Central. Just an outstanding talent. Watched him for many years throughout his high school career, and you also got a Shemar Stewart as well, also a Miami kid, 5-star, who Miami and A&M were, the only 2 hats on the table for him when he decided to pick the Aggies. What have you seen from those 2 guys in particular?
Well, I'll tell you what. I have been on the Amari Daniels bandwagon now for a year plus. I thought he was the best backup to Devon Achane, who you guys will enjoy greatly with the Dolphins. He is awesome. and they kept on trying other guys, Moss especially, but Daniels was the best of the backs on Saturday. 7 carries, 51 yards. He had a long of 27. He's one of those guys that has that instinctiveness, kind of like A-Chain did, where you see a hole, he's gone. He hits it with authority. He's not the biggest guy, 5'8", 200, but he's got that speed. He's elusive in the open field, but I just like his decisiveness. He really gets up the field quickly, and I guess for lack of a better phrase, he's RB1, but it doesn't matter because
Right.
it's going to be him, Moss, and Owens. Shemar Stewart is not a starter, but he's in the rotation and he plays a big role. And he actually came in and talked to the media yesterday, and he was fantastic. I mean, he had us rolling. He's very intelligent, but also very funny. And he said a few telling things when he was talking to us. One of the things that he said was, "My parents wanted to get me out of Miami," and he didn't mean that as an insult. He meant that as they wanted him to get to a place where he could really concentrate and do what he needed to do as a student athlete.
Sure.
And they felt like that would be easier to do in College Station. And somebody kind of followed it up. It's like, well, why did they think that? And he went, "It is Miami."
Right.
It's like, yeah, no kidding. I mean, College Station has a nice little party scene, but it's not Miami. I mean, come on.
Right.
But he mentioned that his parents definitely wanted him to get away. He said that he really had us laughing when he said when he picked A&M, he's like, the whole town hated me. But some of them have come around, and now now I have about 20 people there at the game. But he also said, somebody said, do you know a lot of guys on the team? It's like, yeah, but we're not going to be friends on Saturday. He said they're looking for revenge, but they're not going to get it. That may come some other time, but it's not going to be Saturday. So he kind of called his shot. But this as well as anybody. You're talking about the number 7 player in the country, a 5-star. He's got tremendous ability. He's 285 pounds now, but you see him just wearing a t-shirt and shorts yesterday. He is absolutely ripped. He doesn't have an ounce of body fat on him. Just a tremendous physical specimen. And I think things are starting to slow down for him. He's kind of getting that feel for what he needs to do. And he really kind of started showing that this past weekend. He ran down a reverse. He ended up getting busted for a face mask on it. But this was inside the 5, and he ran down a wideout from behind. It was really, really impressive. And, with the guys that he's playing with, he's not expected to be the dominant player. He's not – people aren't pointing to him to saying, you're the superstar, you have to perform. They've got a great rotation at defensive end. And I think that, as time goes on and he continues to get more comfortable, he's gonna live up to that 5-star billing. It's just really a matter of time.
Sure. Saw outstanding things from him as a high school player here locally at Miami Pace High School. So excited to see him back in Miami as well as Amari Daniels. Plenty of Miami guys on the Miami team itself. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of jawing back and forth during the game. Excited to see what will happen on Saturday. Last year, I was actually in College Station. And I will tell you, Mark, it was the most amazing experience I've ever had at a college football game. From the pageantry of everything beforehand, with the parade and the military, it was just an amazing experience. And then going into the game, massive stadium, being on the field, and just feeling the stadium rock in the press box was scary, but unforgettable moment for me. I think Hard Rock will be rocking. I'm not sure if it'll be to that extent, but it should be a great environment down there in Miami. Last year, the game ended up a 17-9 game where the Aggies held the Hurricanes out of the end zone for the entire contest. This is a 7-point spread to the Aggies. I've seen it as low as 5. How do you think this game turns out?
It's a good question. Like you said, there's a lot of similarities between the two teams, but really, I think this comes down to who's got the most weapons, and I think that A&M does. Uh, and I think that some of them haven't even been unleashed yet because of just the way last weekend worked. Weigman has proven himself to be a very good, very serviceable quarterback, and he's played on the road. He's already gotten his feet wet with that at South Carolina and at Auburn. So it's not like he's going to be going into a foreign environment by going on the road. And I think the ability of A&M to move the ball a little bit better, and I think slow down the running game, not stop it, but slow it down, probably gives the Aggies a bit of an edge. And you take a look at the rosters. I think Mario Cristobal's done a great job of improving the talent levels
Sure.
already. Getting that number 8 class does not suck, and he's done a very good job getting transfers. But the talent overall, I think, still leans A&M's way. So, being the homer, I'm not obligated to take them, but I'm going to.
Okay, you got a score?
34-24 A&M.
34-24. Okay, so they make the spread. Score 34 points. Let's see how it all turns out. I'm actually not sure. I mean, if I were to just kind of guess a score, I think it's going to be a little bit closer than that. I'd probably lean maybe 27, 24,
I could
20,
easily see that.
23, something like that.
Yeah.
And as a homer as well, I would say in favor of the Hurricanes, just with the home advantage. Maybe they get some turnovers and pull off the upset. That's Mark Passwaters. He is the publisher for Aggie Yell. You see his Twitter handle there. Make sure you follow him as well as subscribe to Rivals.com. We're part of the Rivals Network. Thank you so much for joining me today. Great stuff.
No problem, Marcus. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, make sure you subscribe to CanesCounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30. And also subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. And also subscribe to the podcast, which is available on all platforms. Until the next episode of the Storm Tracker podcast.